crow network. The crow sitting on the wire above your street right now already knows your name. Not a sound it makes when you walk by. Not a warning call it uses for everyone in the neighborhood. Your name. A specific, consistent sequence of sounds it uses only for you. One that's shared with every other crow in your area. One those other crows recognize and respond to, even if they've never seen you before in their lives. In 2024, when scientists fed hundreds of thousands of recorded crow conversations into one of the most advanced artificial intelligence systems ever applied to animal communication, that's exactly what they found. The crows had named us, all of us, specifically, individually. And they'd been talking about us constantly, with far more detail and structure than anyone was prepared to discover. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't scientists being cute about animal behavior. This is what the data showed. And once you understand what it means, you'll never look at a bird on a wire the same way again. Here's the part that makes researchers genuinely uncomfortable. The crows didn't just name us. The AI found evidence that they plan around us, that they share information about us across distances of hundreds of miles, that they transmit specific knowledge about specific humans from one generation to the next, so that young crows born after you first entered their territory already have a profile on you before they ever see your face. And when the researchers got too close, when the crows figured out they were being studied, something happened in their communication patterns that the AI could no longer decode. Something new appeared, something that spread through the local crow population and then outward into neighboring territories with the speed of a virus, something the machine couldn't parse. The scientists studying this are still trying to figure out what that means, and the answer they're most reluctant to consider is the one the data keeps pointing toward. But we'll get to that. The surveillance operations start with the surveillance operation that's been running in your neighborhood since long before you were born. Crows have been living alongside human beings for thousands of years, not because they were domesticated, not because humans invited them, but because crows are extraordinarily good at identifying opportunities and extracting information from their environment. Human settlements turned out to be one of the richest environments on the planet for a bird with those abilities. Food is concentrated in human areas, threats are predictable, and humans, unlike most predators, follow consistent routines that a sufficiently observant animal can learn to read and exploit. Crows learn to read us. For decades, most scientists assumed what crows were doing with that information was relatively basic. A crow sees a person carrying food, remembers that person is a source of food. A crow sees a person who previously threatened it, avoids that person. Simple stimulus-response learning, the kind of thing a fairly intelligent animal can do without anything resembling language, planning, or social communication. That assumption was wrong, but nobody knew exactly how wrong until the machines got involved. For several years before the 2024 AI study, researchers in Spain had been recording a population of carrion crows in extraordinary detail. They placed small microphones near nests and attached biologgers to individual birds, capable of capturing every sound those birds produced throughout an entire day. What they collected was a data set of a scale no previous crow research had come close to reaching. Hundreds of thousands of individual vocalizations. And here's the first thing that surprised the researchers before the AI ever got involved. The vast majority of what crows produce is not the loud, harsh call humans associate with them. That famous sound is actually a relatively rare communication event. The AI finds structure. Most of what crows say to each other is quiet, low-amplitude murmuring, soft and continuous, sitting just below the threshold where a human observer standing nearby would register it as significant. For decades, those sounds went almost entirely unstudied, not because researchers didn't know they existed, but because nobody had a tool capable of processing them at the scale needed to find patterns. The data sat there, enormous and unreadable, until the Earth Species Project got involved. The Earth Species Project is a US-based nonprofit with a specific mission. Apply the most advanced artificial intelligence available to the problem of animal communication and find out what animals are actually saying to each other. They'd previously worked on whale calls, dolphin clicks, and primate vocalizations. When they turned their tools on the Spanish crow dataset in 2024, they were expecting to find what most animal communication research finds: a set of discrete signals. This call means food. That call means predator. That other call means come here. A vocabulary without grammar. Labels without relationships. The kind of communication system that's genuinely impressive for an animal, but still clearly separated from human language by a categorical gap. The AI didn't find that. What it found instead pushed that categorical gap somewhere nobody was ready to put it. The machine identified structure in the crow vocalizations, not just variety, not just a range of different sounds with different functions, but structure, specific, repeating, rule-governed patterns in the way sounds were combined and ordered. In human language, this is called syntax. Syntax is the system of rules that determines how words are arranged so they carry meaning. Without syntax, language is just a collection of labels, a list of names for things. With syntax, language can describe relationships between things, encode information about events that happened in the past or might happen in the future, and communicate ideas that go beyond pointing at whatever is directly in front of you right now. The crow brain. The AI was finding the statistical signature of syntax in crow communication. Not metaphorically, not as a rough approximation. The patterns the machine identified were the same kinds of patterns linguists look for when trying to determine whether a sequence of sounds qualifies as structured language rather than complex but unstructured noise. To understand how significant that is, you need to understand what scientists previously believed about the crow brain and why. For more than 100 years, neuroscience operated under an assumption that turned out to be completely wrong. The assumption was that higher intelligence, the kind of cognition required for language and planning and social reasoning, required a cerebral cortex. The cortex is the wrinkled outer layer of the brain found in mammals, including humans, and where most of our complex thinking happens. Birds don't have a cerebral cortex. Their brains are smooth. So, for over a century, scientists looked at bird brains, noted the absence of the cortex, and concluded the hardware for complex cognition simply wasn't there. Birds were limited, their brains were limited, and that was that. What those scientists didn't appreciate is that evolution isn't limited to one solution. The mammalian cortex is one way to build a brain capable of complex cognition. It's not the only way. Birds evolved an entirely different brain structure called the pallium, which looks nothing like the mammalian cortex on the outside, and shares almost no structural similarities that would be obvious to a 19th century anatomist. But at the cellular and functional level, it accomplishes very similar things. Inside a crow's compact brain, neurons are packed at a density that's genuinely extraordinary. The ratio of brain size to body size in corvids, the bird family that includes crows, ravens, rooks, and jays, rivals the ratio found in great apes. Researchers studying corvid cognition began describing them as feathered apes more than a decade ago. After the 2024 AI study, that description started sounding less like a colorful scientific metaphor and more like a precise, literal statement. Crows remember faces. Brain imaging research conducted in the years leading up to the AI study had already begun mapping what happens inside a crow's brain when it encounters a specific human face. When a crow sees a person it has previously associated with a threatening experience, multiple brain regions activate simultaneously, with particularly strong activation in the region functionally equivalent to the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and threat responses in humans and other mammals. What this means, in practical terms, is that when a crow recognizes a face it considers dangerous, it's not simply retrieving a stored visual memory and generating an automatic behavioral response. It's experiencing something measurably similar to fear. The most famous demonstration of how far crow facial recognition goes came from research conducted by Dr. John Marsloff at the University of Washington. Marsloff wanted to test whether crows could identify individual human faces with enough precision to maintain that recognition over time. He was also aware that putting his actual research team at long-term personal risk of being hated by every crow on a university campus wasn't ideal experimental design, so he used masks. His team selected a specific mask with distinctive features and wore it while capturing, banding, and releasing crows on campus. The birds weren't harmed, but being caught and handled was clearly stressful, and the crows responded with aggressive vocalizations and physical resistance. Then, the team stopped wearing the mask entirely and went back to their ordinary faces. The crows had no way to identify them as the same people who had done the catching. What happened next was not subtle. Every time any member of the team put that mask back on, crows throughout the campus area immediately began scolding the mask wearer, following them and, in some cases, physically diving at them. The crows had not learned to recognize specific individuals. They had encoded the face itself as a threat signal that triggered a coordinated group response.